thing because I've missed that before. Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining us. We're excited y'all are here. I'm going to let people file in here for just a second, Arielle, and then we can get after it maybe a minute or two after the hour. This is kind of a fun format. Thank you to everybody who submitted questions and things ahead of time. I put together a little agenda here to keep us on track. But a couple of things to note, this is being recorded. So if you need to jump for whatever reason, we will send the recording after the event wraps this week. I am going to kind of play MC here. I'm going to keep my eye on the chat and the Q&A. So if you have questions for Arielle, she's volunteered to be in the hot seat today. So ask her all the questions. I have built an agenda based on the questions that were submitted ahead of this event. So I'm going to run through those too. Yeah, a kind of a fun open forum today to just ask us anything. All right, with that being said, Arielle, let's do, actually, I made a brief little slideshow for us. Can you see me? Can you see what's going on here? Okay.
Looks great.
We'll do quick little introductions. My name is Kate Guillen. I'm the founder of Simplicity Ops. For anybody that I have not yet met, we are an operations management company that partner with advisors and their firms to help build out and streamline operations to help y'all enjoy your jobs and live a better life. And I'm joined by my friend Arielle today. Arielle, I'll turn it over to you to let you intro yourself and then we can get going.
Awesome. I'm Arielle Minicozzi. I'm the founder and CEO of Sphinx Automation, and we work with the same type of clients as Kate. We love to work with financial advisors, and I am a former financial advisor myself. We help firms set up their tech stack and automate their workflows and processes. So we basically pick up where Kate and Simplicity Ops leaves off and take it over the finish line. And I'm super excited to be here today. Thanks everyone for joining. I see a few familiar names, but a lot of you I don't know, so I'm really excited to dive in.
Well, thank you again for being so generous with your time today. Simplicity Ops and Sphinx work closely together for the purpose of, like she's talking about, automating the things. Like some of our CRMs have native automations, some do not. And regardless of which CRM you're using, the automation functionality is a little limited. Let's just be honest. And so we partner with Arielle and her team to automate all the things that we feel like the CRM should do. And so I brought her on today to kind of put her in the hot seat and ask some of the questions because I get asked a lot, like, where do I start? What are some like low risk automations that we could start to think about incorporating into our practice? And then I want to talk about how do we trigger automations? And I want to talk about kind of taking things to the next level and some of the prerequisites for effective automation. But let's just kind of start at the top or the bottom or however you want to look at it. And how do you answer the question, like, where should I get started?
Yeah, it's a good question because everybody's at a different place in their firm maturity. Everybody's at a different place in their tech stack and their automation maturity. We have people come to us in all different stages of all of those things. Some are brand new launching firms. Some people have been in business for a long time, but they've never set up any automations. They're still using handwritten notes and kind of relying on their memory to move forward, all the way to the other end of the spectrum where we have folks come to us that have already done a lot of groundwork in terms of setting up automations and getting the ball rolling. I would say that as far as like somebody who is just getting started, or maybe you kind of dabbled, but you're thinking about making a larger process or a larger tech stack change, so you don't really want to commit to something that you might end up having to tweak later. We've rolled out within the last year and a half what we're calling quick start projects. And these are 7, what we're calling like core efficiencies for advisors that don't necessarily rely on you having a fully developed, fully cemented process. And they're largely tech agnostic with a few different exceptions to that note. But things like setting up a risk tolerance and investment policy questionnaire and then linking the data that's collected on that to the CRM, syncing, we talked about this in our last webinar, syncing Wealthbox contacts or households to the events that are scheduled on the calendar and automatically categorizing those events. I think we have a lot of Redtail users in the group today. at least based on the questions that were submitted ahead of time. So we have one on that list that's specific to Redtail, which is creating and sending a daily or weekly digest of all the upcoming events, tasks, and other activities that are on each team member's plate. Those are just a few examples. And again, the reason we chose those is because once you've made those core tech stack decisions, which are your CRM and your data gathering system, your calendar and your email platform, like those are usually things that are less likely to change when you've chosen your tech stack. Although, like we were talking about before we jumped on, that may not always be true. Sometimes people do change, but usually those are the key players in your tech stack, and everything else kind of revolves around that. These specific projects that we've picked out, once you've chosen those core platforms, largely will stay the same, whether or not your overall process and client experience gets tweaked or your other tech stack choices might change in the future.
That's great. I appreciate that. I wish I would have known you when I was trying to figure this out back in 2016. I didn't know where to start. And now I'm familiar with like some of the red tail triggers, but I'm curious, what are some of the other triggering events within the CRM or the tech stack in general that you guys can help automate?
Yeah, so I know that we talked about this also last in our last webinar that we did, but Redtail in particular has some built-in automations. They have a list of all of their triggers and they don't have the actions, at least I couldn't find it publicly, but there aren't very many of them on their website. But a lot of the work that we do revolves on building upon those baseline automations that are built into the system and then expanding on them through the use of things like Zapier to make more effective and more efficient the overall processes that folks are doing. So a couple of examples when it comes to CRM specific triggers, things that we can launch and when I say trigger, I'll be clear. What I mean by that is something that happens that we can use to launch other things to happen successively after that thing happens. So CRM specific might be things like a new contact is added to the system or an existing contact is updated. Maybe that's the status changes from prospect to client is a common example. Or maybe an event is scheduled and added to the calendar on the CRM. Maybe a task or a step in a workflow is completed or a workflow is closed out altogether. And for example, we want to launch that next workflow. So I think to your point, Kate, there are automations. We can look at like samples of automations and like this happens, then this happens, and this happens. But sometimes it's more effective to just think about it in pieces. Think about what are the things that happen that should make other things happen, whether that is in the CRM or whether it's somewhere else. And then like what are the things that we want to happen later on as a result. Kind of breaking it up, I think it helps to get the gears turning a little bit better than just trying to think of the entire flow from A to Z all at once. That can be a little bit overwhelming.
I love that. And one of the things that we think about, because we're really big on automating things within Simplicity Ops, and we use a lot of the same technology as the advisors, is looking for repetitive tasks and predictable processes. So like examples of things that we've automated that I think are huge efficiency pickups. When someone schedules an introductory call, it automatically launches the introductory call workflow. It automatically launches we have like some sort of intake questionnaire, the size of your firm, their contact information, what are your goals, whatever, pre-fills it into the opportunity tracker within the CRM. And I look for things like that. So when you start thinking about where to get started and some of these triggers, think about the things that are repetitive and predictable. And I think some of the other favorite ones that I hear advisors talk about a lot, you talked about like the daily download. I love getting that email that says, hey, based on what you got going on in Redtail today, here's all the things that you can, need to be prepared for. But one of the other things I talk a lot about the CRM, Redtail, and Wealthbox being a business management tool. And one of the things that advisors ask for often is like, hey, I just want like a high level dashboard of everything going on. Where are their open tasks? Where are their open opportunities? Where are we at in the sales cycle? And right now you can do all of that out of the CRM, but it's multiple reports and compiling it is kind of a pain in the rear. so I think it's really cool that you guys can like flush that to the service and build an Excel dashboard that really showcases that really explains what's going on within the practice, because it while Redtail and Wealthbox are great as a business management tool, sourcing the information is difficult. And so one of the things that I like so much about your team is historically, when we're having these conversations with advisors, it's like, oh, you can't really do that. And so before now, we tell a client that you can't really do that. We talk to Arielle and her team because chances are you can do that. You just need someone with the sorcery that you guys have in that skill set to be able to make it happen. And so I guess I'm curious, what are like your top three automations? I know you guys have your quick starts, but some of the ones that come to mind that advisors ask us about is like, can we make client reviews easier? Can we make building agendas easier? Can we make onboarding a new client easier? I'm curious how you guys think and approach that.
Yeah, I mean, I love the three that you chose: client reviews, building agendas, client onboarding. I mean, I think for me, definitely recent favorites, it always changes depending on where the zeitgeist of the times are and what folks are having trouble with. But I'd say like some of my favorite ones to set up recently are that syncing of the contact or the household record to the event in Wealthbox, setting the category. I mean, I'm saying Wealthbox, but everything I'm saying for Wealthbox can also be applied to Redtail too, or other CRMs. So forget the Wealthbox piece. But setting it up so that when an event is booked in your scheduling system and then added to your CRM calendar, whichever one that happens to be, finding or creating that contact or that household record, syncing it to the event, making sure that that record is tied together so that later on, when we do want to generate those snapshots and reports, we have the information accurately tied in, and then setting the category. I would say, as far as client onboarding is concerned, another favorite of mine to set up, because I think this one adds a lot of efficiency, is setting up a client profile or client onboarding questionnaire that gathers the majority of the information that you need, not only to do the financial planning work, but to do things like open accounts, move money, all of the custodial specific data points that you need, and gather that all in one place. But not only leave it in the data gathering system, but then to sync that over to your CRM software to, again, create a new contact or to update that existing contact to add in all that extra information that you've now just gathered. And then as far as client reviews are concerned, this is something that kind of comes in waves. A lot of our clients do surge style meetings. So it's funny because that's more of a seasonal request where, oh, now I'm in surge and this is a pain point that's top of mind. But in the last, let's say, like 2 or 3 years in particular, a lot more of our clients have moved to that surge style of model. And so this is something we've been doing a lot more of. And I think that it's really effective and helpful to do things like pull a list of all of the clients in the CRM that meet certain criteria. For example, if you're segmenting your clients by surge period or by, amount of assets under management, maybe you tag your clients as A, B, C, etc. Pull all of the clients that meet a certain criteria and loop through that list to either send email invitations to get them to book that upcoming meeting, or to draft at least the email and notify a team member, hey, here's all the drafts ready to go. Maybe we're even pulling out some additional notes from previous meetings and appending it to those emails. So it really just streamlines and makes much more efficient that process, which can be really tedious depending on how many clients you have, to get that ball rolling and get that invitation out in front of clients. And then once they actually book the meeting, then we launch a whole series of other things, like, to your point, kicking off the right workflow, or so on and so forth. There's so many things that we might automate after they have actually booked the meeting from there.
I love it. You touched on something that I know you and I deeply align on, and those are some of the prerequisites for effective automation. Like in all things, garbage in, garbage out. And so I think people get really excited about this idea of automation, but maybe because they think it's a silver bullet or something, it's going to help them get there quickly. I don't know. But what I find is when people add automation in too soon in a clunky, junky, disorganized system, they actually exacerbate the issue, and they start automating garbage. And so I'd like you to talk, I guess be the bearer of bad news, about the prerequisites that are required for effective automation so that people understand that there's a little bit of love that needs to go into the system first for automation to be effective.
For sure. And we just have two, but accomplishing them can be harder than you might think on the surface. And they are that you must have your workflows and processes written down. And not only that they're written down, but that you're actually following the written processes at least 80% of the time or more, because oftentimes people come to us, they have no processes. Okay, that's problem number one. Problem number two, though, is a little sneakier, which is you have processes written down, but you're not actually following them, or you're not following them the majority of the time because you're constantly finding yourself making exceptions to the documented process in order to, like you said, clunky junky, garbage in, garbage out. Like the processes themselves are not reflective of what you're actually needing to do day in and day out. And so you're finding yourself making exceptions constantly. Those might as well, at that point, you might as well not have even gotten your processes written down, throw them out, start over, do the upfront work. That's like we were talking about this right before we jumped on. Like that's not work I enjoy doing at all. So that's all Kate's sphere and her team's sphere. But once you've got those written documented processes, you've figured out the vision for what that client experience should look like. And not only the client experience too, but also what your team's day-to-day looks like, because there are a lot of business development and business management things that we can also automate that don't necessarily touch directly on the client interaction, but that still are valuable areas of opportunity for efficiency. But once you've gotten those documented and you're ensuring that you're actually following the documented processes, that they're working well for you and that there's no gaps or areas of chaos, let's just say, then at that point is when automation can really step in and say, okay, now we see all the things that people are doing. How can we take some of those human completed tasks and transfer them from the human's plate to the technology, to the automation, and free up the human capacity for the things that actually add value, things like nurturing the client relationship, things like actually doing the implementation work that clients have hired you to do rather than doing the admin data entry rote and boring things that are just things you have to do, but like who wants to do them? Maybe some people do, but not me.
I feel that. I feel that deeply. And I think it parlays itself really nicely into the next question that we got. And obviously, this is like so buzzy right now, is this idea of leveraging AI for the non-human things. And I'm curious how you think about the CRM plus AI, automation plus AI. How do they play together in a meaningful way?
It's a whole new world. So everything is changing day by day. I mean, you think you have a grasp on the capacity of AI, and all of a sudden there's some new advancement that comes out, and you're like, whoa, we feel like we're in the tailwind of all of this development and innovation, which is exciting, but it can also be really overwhelming. I think that AI is a really useful tool. I think that there are a lot of proven examples of things that AI can already do really well today. Things like taking meeting notes and transcripts and kind of generating summaries. Although, again, going back to what you said about garbage in, garbage out, that the quality of those generated summaries will really depend on the quality of your prompt. So that's a skill to develop and to hone in order to get the best result. But I think that AI today even does really well with that. And then as far as future advancements and things that I see on the short-term horizon are things like CRMs that are incorporating AI features to do automations or to gather more advanced data. They're not perfect now, but they're really getting a lot better day in and day out. So I do see that being an opportunity. I think another thing that we can really use AI for today, and this is a little bit more nebulous, is idea generation. So things like, okay, I have my processes and I do want some help uncovering some areas of opportunity. AI does a decent job at helping folks take their tech stack, take their processes, and give some high-level bullet point ideas about areas of opportunity to automate or add efficiency, which then you can either implement yourself or take to somebody like us to help you actually implement it. But I will just caution in that area. Some clients have come to us with like, "Hey, I ran this through ChatGPT, I ran this through Claude, and here's what the AI said were opportunities for me." And it's not always accurate. Sometimes we've seen that the AI will, I wouldn't say hallucinate per se, but the AI will assume that there is a capability that doesn't truly exist right now. But largely, I do think that getting that creative feedback can be really helpful in terms of opening up your mind to the possibilities, and then again taking that as an idea for things that you can implement yourself, or coming to somebody like us and saying, "Hey, here's some ideas. Is this possible? And can you help us actually execute upon it?" The answer is largely yes.
I think that's so cool. And, if somebody hasn't met those prerequisites just yet, I love the idea of using AI for idea generation. So if you're like, okay, I mean, you as the business owner have to have the vision and clarity on what you want the experience to feel like. But then you can go to your bot and say, hey, listen, so when we bring on a new client, it's like a 3 meeting, meeting process. Here's what we call the meetings. Here's how I'm thinking about the experience and what I want it to feel like. Can you map this out into a workflow? What are my steps? What are my tasks? How often should we communicate? Like, I think those are great opportunities to use AI to get clarity. But then you have to put the human embellishment in it to make it feel and sound and look like you. I think it's good for drafting emails, but like, we all know what it feels like to receive an AI generated email. You need to put some love into it to make it feel and sound like you. But I think, compared to the old fashioned way, when we like whiteboarded it all out, I think, we're talking about silver bullets. This is a much more direct way to document those processes so that you're at a place where, we can automate some of this stuff. But I think it's fascinating the rate at which this stuff is innovating, and it's been fun to be a part of it. Okay, kind of on the same topic about garbage in, garbage out. I think everybody understands that, but I want to hone in on a second here about automation's inability to fix bad processes. If you have band-aids on band-aids on band-aids, we can't automate that. And the impact on team adoption and accountability. I'm curious how you think about how automation can help with team adoption and accountability, and how it can hurt team adoption and accountability if done inappropriately.
I think it's all about trust. And like anything, if you present to your team something that hurts them in the sense of adding more to their plate than taking things away, because, for example, we set up an automation and then it turns out that it's actually not doing the thing that we want it to do. Now your team has to go back, and not only do they have to do the actual work, but then they have to also fix what went wrong too. So I think that that's an example of a bad outcome where the trust erodes because you as the leader of the team are coming to them and saying, "Hey, we're bringing you this thing and it's going to make things more efficient and it's going to improve your lives," only to find out that it's actually doing the opposite. Nobody wants that, the team and yourself included, and us too. I mean, it's not a great experience, and it doesn't breed a good relationship between us and your team if you're coming to us and saying, "Hey, here's the things that we want to happen," only to find out that we set it up and it's like, "Oh, just kidding. This is not what we actually really wanted to do." But on the flip side, when it's done in the opposite vein, when it is in fact something that you and the team have spent time figuring out, "Hey, this is what we want to happen when this other thing happens. This is what we want the client experience to look like. We have spent the upfront time documenting our processes and testing them and making sure that this is in fact what we want done automation wise." When it works really well and it does add that efficiency and it does breed that trust, that's a really good outcome, and it does lead to that better team satisfaction.
I love that you tie it back to trust. I talk to clients and prospects about this a lot. And sometimes I think people look at me like, oh, how do we build trust in a system? And I'll tell you how you don't build trust in a system. And it goes back to the foundational, the prerequisites that we're talking about, because when you have, preaching that your CRM should be the centralized, business management tool in your practice, but you're missing addresses, you're missing phone numbers, dates of birth are wrong, you got, bad socials, you have, outdated information. Like if that very basic foundational stuff isn't trustworthy, nobody's going to believe or buy into any of the more advanced stuff that we're building. Because if you go to Bob Jones's profile and his date of birth is wrong, his employment information is inaccurate, but you have a workflow that's telling you to process a distribution that's like, well, I can't trust the basic contact information. Am I really supposed to be issuing this distribution? And then there's this communication back and forth. And now the automation or whatever triggered that workflow to issue the distribution is just causing so much more work than it's worth. And when I hear people complain about automations, they're like, oh, I'm having to babysit these automations, or the workflow is inaccurate. It generally stems from the foundational stuff being inaccurate. So before this stuff is going to be effective, you got to do an internal audit and make sure that the data within the database is well organized and trustworthy, so that the rest of this stuff, so the team can buy into and adopt the rest of this stuff.
I agree 100%. And I do think that there's a level of, to be perfectly clear, like there's always going to be a level of testing and vetting after automations are set up. Especially in recent years, we've tried to do much more thorough job of making sure that anything that's client facing is not being automatically sent out, especially at the beginning, making sure that we help clients when we're working together with people to implement, we're helping them by creating testing checklists and giving them exact step-by-step protocols that they need to follow. Because sometimes it's not always obvious what is going to happen. Human behavior is sometimes unpredictable. Somebody uses one email the first time they book a meeting with you, and then, just kidding, I've decided to create and use a completely separate email than I've ever used before. So now the automation is kind of stupid in the sense that unless you give it clear and explicit instructions, it's not going to know what to do. Right. So that that this is the same person, but unless we tell the automation, hey, if we don't find a contact by this email, we should fall back and instead look at the name to make sure we don't in fact have a contact already in the system who is this same person. So I will say, to be fair and to be clear, there is always going to be that level of needing to check in on things and making sure that they're working in the early days and kind of vetting it and testing it and trying to break it and just uncover, hey, there's some hiccups here. That's true whether it's something that we implement or whether you self-implement. But if you build it out in a way, and as you're building it, you're documenting and you're making checklists and you're making sure that you have a clear process for auditing it, that part can be much smoother and can help with that as well.
You touched on something that I think is really important. I say this a lot, whether we're talking about any technology, the CRM, your custodial platform, portfolio management, whatever it is. These are living, breathing pieces of your business. They evolve, they change. And so setting that expectation, I think, is so wise, that there needs to be an ongoing audit of these systems. It's not a one and done thing. It is something that someone on your team is going to have to own and assess and evaluate regularly to ensure that it remains accurate and useful and effective. I didn't have that. I didn't think about that when we first started working with clients, and people get frustrated, they fall back into old habits, or the data gets disorganized. And now we have, a quarterly audit process to ensure that the work that we are doing remains, the people are accountable to it, and that it remains well organized. Otherwise, it kind of snowballs and you fall back into bad habits, and things get disorganized, especially when you're working with a team of multiple people. So I think it's really smart of you to bring that up today and set a very clear expectation that you need to give the systems grace and you also need to evaluate them just like, anybody else on your team. I have a couple questions here about other automation opportunities. So we've talked a lot about the CRM, but other things that I find that are painful to advisors are file management, trading and rebalancing tools. Aside from automating things within the CRM, how are you automating things within other technologies?
Yeah, I mean, file management is a great example. So doing things like somebody fills out a form in JotForm or Precise FP, finding or creating that client or household folder. Maybe you have a folder tree of subfolders that need to be created, and then putting the completed PDF copy of that questionnaire into the right folder. Or clients upload documents. That's a common thing that we set up for folks is what we call our documentation needs list generator. We mostly do it in JotForm, but we have a few folks that we do it for in Precise FP, where the client or the team member fills out a couple of questions, about 15 questions about their situation. And based on the answers, it generates a customized list of what the client needs to provide documentation-wise. They can upload it directly to the form, and then it will sync securely back into the OneDrive or the Google Drive or the SharePoint, whichever file management system somebody is using. So that's a really good example of a third-party non-CRM related automation setup that we can do. There's also things like email marketing platforms. I talked to a prospective client today about using MailChimp to send out nurturing campaigns that are somewhat dynamic based on the actions that a lead takes or doesn't take, or based on which resources that they're expressing interest in to define what topics they should be sent emails around. There's plenty of opportunities, but those are the two that come to mind first and foremost. And I'm excited also to get into the questions too. If somebody has a question about a specific system, please feel free to drop it in the chat and we're happy to answer it.
I think that's great. And something that you said the last time we had a webinar like this are like the automation tests. And the takeaways that I took from that conversation that I've applied in my own business is exactly what you're talking about. Is it repetitive? Is it predictable? Is there a clear trigger? Is there a clear owner? Do we know exactly what's supposed to happen next? What happens if it fails? And does a human need to approve anything? Just like you're talking about, things that are client facing not being sent out automatically until it's totally trustworthy. And what does that approval process look like? I think those are really helpful things to think about when you start building your list of automations. But I want to open it up for some questions here, Arielle, if you're open to it. We've gone through most of the questions that have been submitted. But if you guys, anybody that's on this call, have specific questions for her, I think now is an awesome opportunity to pick her brain.
Yes, please.
I'm curious if most of the people on here are Redtail users or Wealthbox users. I historically had been a Redtail user and I loved the native automation, but they fell short a lot of times. And it was really frustrating because things that seemed very logical didn't always function logically. I could tell kind of like what you said. There was a bunch of questions that were submitted that were Redtail specific, but I mean, both systems operate very similarly.
Yeah, again, I think it really just boils down to not necessarily thinking about it as using a specific system in the sense of a specific technology platform, but think about it as using a specific system in the broader sense of the word.
Yeah.
So CRM, what does a CRM do? It manages your contact data. And a lot of times your CRM is also your home base in terms of processes, things like tasks, things like workflows, things like opportunities. But thinking about it more in terms of the functionality that it's doing rather than the platform itself can really help expand not only the way that you're thinking about it, but also how you search for resources around it. Like you might ask, like we talked about AI, hey, what are my opportunities? Instead of saying, what are my opportunities to automate within Redtail, you might say, what are my opportunities to automate using a CRM and a scheduling tool? And here's what I am using, but think about it more broadly than just this specific platform. I think can help really open doors. And even things like looking at other industries. I had a conversation with another consultant the other day, and she told me, I'm always looking to other industries like the medical industry, the restaurant industry, even though their tools and platforms are not necessarily the same as what we as advisors are using. The idea of that service-based model, interacting with clients and making sure that they're having a great experience, gathering that data, utilizing that data to do certain things, those core principles apply whether or not the business is an advisory firm or some other type of business. And so I think that can also help generate some ideas in terms of what opportunities are out there.
I agree. One of the things someone said to me is the thing that's been most helpful about automation is reducing duplicative work and rekeying the same thing in multiple systems. So if you're rekeying it, like your example with Precise FP or Jotform or whatever, in an intake form and then into the CRM and then onto custodial paperwork and then into your SharePoint, like how can we do that one time and push it to all the systems? Or like, the opportunity tracker I think is great. It's a little limited, but like I want to track sales cycles from the time that the prospect reaches out to the time, we close the deal. How long is that? How do we extract that information? And I find the best way to do that is by leveraging Zapier or something, pushing it onto a spreadsheet and analyzing the data from a spreadsheet. It's much more comprehensive than trying to run reports out of the stinking CRM. And so start thinking about these areas that are painful. And I challenge you to not limit yourself, be like, oh, well, the CRM isn't capable of that. There are people like Arielle and her team that can figure that stuff out. And now your CRM becomes so much more robust. And I think when I opened my mind to that and introduced the world of automation, our life got infinitely easier and people had more time. People had more time to do the high value stuff and not rekey stuff across multiple systems.
It's true. I mean, that was always my tenet when I had my own RIA and also when I started working with other advisors, as much as possible. And of course, there are some limitations depending on the platform, unfortunately, or fortunately, I guess, depending on how you look at it, because a lot of our client data is sensitive data.
Yeah.
Things like socials, things like bank account numbers. There are platforms that are out there that are tailored to financial advisors that don't offer integrations with other systems. And so it's not always the case, but as much as possible, my vision for my own RIA when I was an advisor and for the work that I do with clients is that we really want to try to not re-enter that same piece of data more than one time if we can possibly do that. It's collected somewhere and then it's stored somewhere else. And as much as possible from that point forward, the automations reference the stored data.
Brilliant. Brilliantly said. Well, cool, you guys. We got a couple more minutes here. If anybody wants to drop any other questions in here, I think this, is an awesome opportunity, the tremendous resource. Arielle, I appreciate you being here and letting us pepper you with all of our questions. This is a fascinating topic to me and something that has created an astronomical amount of capacity in my own business, as well as across our client relationship. So I wanted to bring this conversation to you all today to get you thinking about, once you have the foundational stuff in place, how do we start to take your systems and processes to the next level? And automating the manual, redundant work is exactly where you should focus next. So we got a quiet group here today. Nobody has any other questions, or maybe we just answered all of them in our agenda, which is awesome. But if anybody has, something comes up, a week from now, you're welcome to reach out to us. We are working very closely with the Sphinx team now to help bring all of this to life for all of you. So please reach out. I'd be happy to connect you with Arielle or my team and show you what is possible within your practice. So any parting words, my friend?
Just thanks so much for having me. Thanks everybody for attending. And as Kate said, if you think of any questions after the fact, feel free to reach out. I'm happy to have a one-on-one chat with anybody who has personal questions and doesn't feel comfortable sharing them with the group, or as always happens to me, as soon as the session ends, then I'm like, oh no, now I thought of the question that I should have asked when I had the opportunity. So don't be afraid to avail yourself of that. I'm here as a resource to help.
Love it. Well, thanks, crew. Thanks, everybody, for hanging out today, and Arielle for being so generous with your time. Happy automating to all of y'all.
Happy automating.
Talk to you soon.